You've done it today. You got up, walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, stared at the same shelves you've seen 1,000 times, closed it, and walked away. You weren't hungry. You knew that before you even stood up. And yet something pulled you there anyway. Some invisible wordless signal that felt just enough like a need that your body moved before your brain had any say in it. And here's what nobody tells you. You'll do it again in an hour, not because the food changed, because whatever sent you there the first time is still sitting there, quiet and unresolved, running in the background like a program you can't close. This isn't about willpower. This isn't about discipline. What's actually happening inside your brain is far more interesting than that. And once you understand it, you will never look at that refrigerator the same way again. Picture this. You're somewhere between 6 and 10 years old. Something happened, maybe something small. You scraped your knee. You had a bad day at school you couldn't explain. You were restless on a summer afternoon with nowhere to put the energy. And someone who loved you handed you something to eat. A snack, a cookie, something warm. And for a moment, the discomfort lifted. The noise inside you quieted. You felt briefly, okay. Your brain filed that, not as a memory, as an instruction, as an equation written in a place far deeper than conscious thought. Discomfort arrives, food resolves it. You didn't choose to write that equation. You were a child, but your brain has been running it ever since. Neuroscientists call this a conditioned dopamine response. And here's the part that changes everything. The dopamine, the actual chemical reward, doesn't come from eating. It comes from the anticipation of eating. The moment you decide you're going to the kitchen, your brain has already started dispensing relief. By the time you open the fridge, the reward is halfway delivered. This is why you can stare at a shelf with nothing you even want, close the door, and still feel vaguely better. You weren't looking for food. You were looking for the pattern, the familiar sequence that your brain has learned to read as, I responded to discomfort. I did something. I am okay now. But here's what's underneath the brain chemistry. Psychologists call it experiential avoidance, the deeply human tendency to move away from uncomfortable internal experiences rather than sit with them. The fridge is one of the most efficient avoidance tools ever invented. It's always there. It requires no real decision. It's socially acceptable at any hour. You can perform the entire ritual of avoidance in 90 seconds and return to whatever you were doing with the feeling slightly muffled, slightly more manageable, until it surfaces again. And it always does, because you didn't resolve it. You refrigerated it. So what are you actually feeling in those moments? Psychologists have mapped this more precisely than most people realize. The trigger almost never is hunger or even stress in the broad sense. It's something more specific. It's the experience of an unfinished emotional loop. Your brain is wired to complete things, to close open circuits. When something happens that it can't immediately resolve, an argument with no ending, a task you're avoiding, a vague anxiety you can't name, your brain reads that as a quiet emergency. And if the real solution isn't available, it reaches for the next best thing. Something fast, something reliable, something already in the kitchen. This is why the fridge check is almost always predictable, right after a difficult phone call, in the gap between finishing one thing and starting the next. Late at night, when the day is over and your thoughts are louder than you expected. These aren't random moments of appetite. These are the exact moments an emotional loop opened, and your brain went looking for the fastest exit. Here's what changes when you understand this. Not the behavior overnight, but something shifts when you catch yourself mid-walk to the kitchen and ask a different question. Not what do I want to eat, but what just happened. Not am I hungry, but what am I trying to move away from right now? Because the fridge was never the problem. It's just the address your brain learned to send you whenever something inside needed tending. The practice is simple, but not easy. Pause. Get curious about what fired the signal. Sometimes it has a name. Sometimes it's just a texture, a vague unease, something unresolved. Naming it precisely isn't even the point. The point is you turn toward it instead of away from it. You gave your brain a different experience of what it means to respond to discomfort. Not with food, with attention. Willpower fights the behavior. Understanding dissolves the reason for it. And once you see the reason clearly, once you look that cold open door and recognize it for what it really is, a mirror, not a meal, you've already done something most people never do. You've started listening to the signal instead of silencing it.